Elias stood before the shimmering crystalline arbiter in thousands of hostile eyes, his hand trembling as he displayed the holographic heartbeat of a child that science claimed could not exist. The blue pulse flickered against the cold, sterile light of the hub. The galaxy called her a broken relic, he whispered, his voice cracking through the silence of 100 worlds. But she was never empty. If you've ever felt like your worth was measured in numbers and blueprints rather than the life you lead, you'll want to see how this story ends. Follow along as we uncover the spark that ignited a sector. 8 months earlier, the first frost had settled on the leaves of the terra lily, sitting on Elias's windowsill. It was a stubborn little thing, surviving on a frontier world that most diplomats wouldn't even visit. The Xylari ship arrived like a shard of fallen glass, cutting through the dusty sky of Eithilgard with a grace that felt like an insult to the mud-stained farmers below. They came to drop off Lady Lysithea. In the hushed, cruel circles of the Highborn, she was the Barren, a royal whose genetic sequence had failed the primary test of her people: utility. She stepped off the ramp with her head held high, though her eyes were hollow, reflecting the gray horizon of her exile. The diplomats didn't stay long. They delivered her like a piece of faulty equipment and vanished back into the stars. Elias watched her from the edge of the landing pad. He didn't see a disgraced aristocrat. He saw someone who looked exactly like the soil of Eithilgard, hardened, lonely, and waiting for something to take root. Weeks passed in a cold, silent friction. The Lysithea kept to the stone cottage at the edge of the fields, a shadow behind the curtains. But the greenhouse was Elias's sanctuary, and it was there he spent his nights trying to revive a dying cycad fern. The plant was a nightmare of alien biology, its fronds turning a sickly, translucent silver. One evening a shadow fell across the potting bench. "You're suffocating the roots," a voice said. It was melodic but sharp, like a violin string pulled too tight. Lysithea stood in the doorway. She didn't wait for an invitation. She moved toward the plant, her long, pale fingers hovering over the soil. "The Xylari believe in perfection through manipulation," she murmured, "more to the plant than to him. But xenobotany taught me that sometimes the most rigid systems are the first to break." We'll find out just how much can break when two worlds collide in the next part of our journey. They began to work together. It started as a clinical exchange of knowledge, the farmer's intuition for the land meeting the exile's deep understanding of celestial flora. Elias showed her how to feel the vibration of the water pumps through the floorboards. In return, she taught him the language of the soil, explaining that what the Xylari called primitive was actually a form of deep, chaotic intelligence. Every day, the terra lily on the sill seemed to grow a little brighter. Elias found himself watching the way Lysithea's hands, once meant for scepters, grew calloused and stained with the dark earth of his world. The silence in the greenhouse changed as the weeks bled into months. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating quiet of two strangers, but the rhythmic lull of a shared purpose. Elias watched the way Lysithea spoke to the plants, her voice a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the very glass. One night, under the pale glow of Eithilgard's twin moons, the tension finally snapped. They were working on a cross-pollination that should have been impossible, linking a Terran vine to a Xylari bloom. Their hands met over the petals. Elias didn't pull away. He felt the heat of her skin, so different from the cool porcelain exterior she presented to the world. In that moment, the genetic flaws the galaxy obsessed over vanished. There was only the weight of her gaze and the terrifying, beautiful realization that their DNA wasn't a blueprint. It was a bridge that no one thought could be built, but the peace was short-lived. Lysithea collapsed while tending the northern groves, her skin turning a translucent, bruised violet. The panic in Elias's chest was a physical blow. He rushed her to the colony's modest med bay, expecting a toxin or a failed immune response. Instead, the old diagnostic machine began to chime a sequence it hadn't played in decades. The technician, a grizzled man who had seen everything, stared at the screen in disbelief. "She's not dying, Elias," he whispered, his eyes wide. she's carrying. But the readings. The cellular structure is shifting, it's adapting. The news ripped through the sector like a solar flare. The Silari High Council reacted with cold fury, branding the pregnancy a biological abomination and a political hoax. They demanded a hearing at the Galactic Hub, intending to strip Lysithea of her remaining status and prove that primitive human genes could never merge with their supposedly perfect lineage. And that was how Elias found himself standing in the center of the Great Hall, a man of dirt and sweat, facing a sea of crystalline beings. And now, in the tribunal hall, under the silence of 300 species, the outcome rested on a single piece of evidence. The arbiter, a towering entity of living light, leaned forward. Elias didn't look at the council. He looked at Lysithea, who sat pale and resolute in the witness dock. He activated the projector. The holographic heartbeat filled the room, a steady, double thump that echoed with a resonance no Xylari had ever heard. It wasn't the sound of a hoax. It was the sound of a new life that had taken the best of both species to survive. When the arbiter finally spoke, the voice was like grinding stone. Life does not require your permission to adapt. The child is real. The union is valid. The laughter of 1,000 worlds died the moment our daughter took her first breath. Years later, the political storms have faded into history books, but the soil remains. Elias stands on the porch of their cottage, watching a young girl with shimmering violet eyes run through the tall grass. She stops by the windowsill, reaching out to touch a vibrant red flower. The terra lily is no longer a struggling survivor. It is spread across the garden, its petals thick and healthy, thriving in the harsh frontier wind. It is a simple beauty, a reminder that the most resilient things are often those the world deemed broken. Which makes me wonder, if a single flower can change the face of a planet, what parts of yourself are you waiting to let bloom? We'll be here tomorrow to share more stories of the unexpected.